Now imagine a commander standing on the beach of a newly discovered land. This land has everything, massive resources, a lot of money to be made, but it also has people. This commander wants a license to kill, and he gets one. But in this case, it's not really a license, it's more like a notarized legal document, which when one of the historians of that time read the document, he famously said that I cannot decide if I should laugh or cry after reading this. Am I talking about today? Believe it or not, similar things have happened in the past. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of El Requerimiento of 1513, and the backdrop is the Americas. Hi, my name is Misha and welcome to Tarihi Tales. If you like this channel and you want to support us, you can do so by going on Patreon and becoming our patron. Otherwise, you can also become a member of this YouTube channel. The link is in the description box. And if you're in Pakistan, you can help out with the number on screen. Other than that, you can make sure to like, share, subscribe, comment. All of that good stuff really helps us out as well. Thank you. So the Requeriment of 1513 is almost a 1,000-word document which served as the perfect legalization of mass murder for the Spanish Empire. So basically, when the Spanish began their brutal conquest of the Americas, they wanted to have a justification. They couldn't just start fighting for the sake of it. They didn't want to say that they're doing this for profits. They needed something better. So they commissioned a jurist to draft this document. The Requerimiento declared that the indigenous people of the Americas must be given a chance to acknowledge two things. First, the supremacy of the Catholic Church and the Pope. And secondly, the authority of the Spanish monarchy. Now, when you look at the actual document, it opens as starting out by claiming the one true faith, which in this case it claimed was Christianity. And from here, the requirement kind of pivots to its central threatening summons. And I quote, this is what the document says. Therefore, I beg and require you, as best I can, that you recognize the Church as Lord and Superior of the universal world, and the most elevated Pope in its name, and His Majesty in his place as Superior and Lord and King, and consent that these religious fathers declare and preach, and His Majesty and I in His name will receive you and will leave your women and children free, without servitude, so that with them and with yourselves you can freely do what you wish, and we will not compel you to turn Christians. So this is how it kind of phrases that, okay, you need to accept the Pope, the Church, and the Spanish monarchy. It's not saying that convert to Christianity, it's just saying that accept that that is the one true faith, it's better. And then it states quite directly that the choice that the indigenous people have is accepting these things or suffering. And it says, but if you do not do it, with the help of God, I will enter forcefully against you, and I will make war everywhere and however I can, and I will subject you to the yoke and obedience of the Church and His Majesty, and I will take your wives and children, and I will make them slaves, and I will take your goods, and I will do to you all the evil and damages that a lord may do to vassals who do not obey or receive him. And the most interesting thing is that finally the requirement actually blames the indigenous people for the suffering they're bringing upon themselves. And it says, and I solemnly declare that the deaths and damages received from such will be your fault and not that of His Majesty, nor mine, nor of the gentlemen who came with me. So this was kind of like the gist of what the requirement was. This was written in that document. And there was a law regarding this requirement, which the historian Samuel Dickenson very nicely summarizes. And he says that the commander was basically asked without fail to read the requirement to the Indians at least 3 times before proceeding. A notary and a priest had to be present during the ceremony. And crucially, the reader was supposed to give the indigenous people time to kind of think about it, to deliberate upon it. Now, this is what the law actually stated, but what happened in reality was quite different. Let's talk about how this actually played out in the jungles with famous Spanish figures like Hernan Cortez. This is the famous guy that took down the Aztec Empire. And we can also talk about Francisco Pizarro. This is the one that did the same with the Inca Empire. The historical accounts of the requirement's actual use are actually absurdly cartoonish. Scholars actually talk about how some Spaniards would mumble the text into their beards and do that while they were still on ships which had not even reached shore. So the indigenous people had never even heard what these people are saying, but in their minds they've practiced what was told, they've read out the requirement, and they've cleansed their conscience. Now it's the indigenous people's fault that they're going to be murdered. There are other accounts where the Spaniards would crumple up the paper on which the requirement is written and throw it at the backs of the indigenous people who were fleeing the Spanish attacks. So the thing about reading it to them beforehand, giving them the option and all of that was kind of dismissed. Now, one famous example involving the party of Hernando de Soto, the friars who were supposed to kind of read out the requirements, these people did read the requirements and read it 3 times, but read it from far, far away. But in their minds, they had fulfilled the requirement of reading it and they didn't want to get involved in the actual battle and maybe get killed. So they read it from so far away that the indigenous people didn't even know about it. Now, one more crucial thing is the fact that, of course, the native people in the Americas, they did not speak Spanish, right? The Spanish spoke Spanish. So one thing about the requirement was that it was encouraged to translate it for the indigenous people so they can understand it, but it was not a requirement. So basically, they would read out the requirement in Spanish or Latin to people who didn't understand what they were saying, and in their minds, they had been given a fair shot of not being killed, but obviously, that's not the case. They didn't even understand what the people are saying. It was more like a formality which was kind of designed to clear the conscience of the Spanish themselves rather than anything else. And the fact that the indigenous people are not responding and accepting the superiority of the church, the pope, and the monarchy just gave the conquistadors the motive that they wanted, to be able to conquer these lands and kill as many people as they could without feeling guilty because they had given them a fair shot. Now, a really good question to ask here is that, was this the norm? Did all the European powers that eventually went to the Americas do similar things, perform similar rituals? Well, in the words of the historian Patricia Seed, no other European state created a fully ritualized protocol for declaring war against indigenous peoples. And at that time, the other European powers actually found the requirement quite odd and even barbaric. The British, French, and Dutch actually even made fun of it for being very Moorish, which basically means very Islamic, because Spain had an Islamic past. And with that also lies the answer as to why Spain was the only power which kind of came up with this ritual. Historians talk about how this document and its reading was kind of inspired by the Islamic Jihad. Because Spain did have an Islamic past, it was under Muslim rule for centuries until the fall of Granada. So Islam had left its imprint on the people there, the culture there, and even today, the architecture there. Now, when we say that it's kind of inspired by the jihad, it's really important to understand what jihad actually means. And in the word of some of the most famous historians like Mikhail, the modern day definition of jihad is very distorted, the mainstream definition, because people think that it means to just wage war against everybody who's not a Muslim. And that's not really true. Nobody wants to do that. Most of the meaning of the word jihad is actually devoid of any military connotations. I'll tell you in the words of Mikhail himself, and he states, the Muslim practice of jihad, despite modern-day distortions, jihad does not always or even usually have a military connotation. Its most general meaning is to struggle to accept the summons to follow the path designated by God. Most commonly, this meant to endeavor to become a better person, a better servant of God, to strive toward the advancement of one's personal faith, moral character, and religious practice. On occasion, when jihad did refer to taking up arms against an enemy, strict rules defined the combat. The first step of any jihad was to invite a non-Muslim enemy to convert to Islam, an act that, if performed, would eliminate the need for war. This invitation, which always occurred on the cusp of a potential war, was not only a way to avoid costly bloodshed, but also a means of winning acknowledgement of Islam's superiority. So, in the sense that the invitation to Islam kind of implies the superiority of Islam, was the only way in which the requirement kind of mimicked this Islamic practice. It did not mimic what came after, because in jihad, in the Islamic act of war, there are a lot of rules which need to be followed, which involve things like not killing the elderly, children, women, trees. Like, there are a lot of things that come under the rules of jihad. But obviously, in the case of the conquistadors, the rest of the rules were all dismissed, but this acknowledgement of the superiority and that cleansing of one's own, conscience was kind of picked up by their Islamic past. And of course, the what came after reading the requirement kind of, as history has kind of, noted, it was a genocidal affair. Entire populations were wiped out, entire empires were killed, and very brutally. Now, El Requerimiento was finally abolished in 1566. But this kind of remains like a lesson as to what power can do. And as a very famous historian, Miles Ogborn suggests, that the most horrifying acts of power aren't always executed by a sword, but are often solidified by the process of inscription and reinscription, by turning a brutal campaign into a just act, all thanks to a piece of official paper which legalizes anything that you're doing, any wrong things that you're doing. The reason this story is so important is to show how things which you may think that just because you're saying they're just, history doesn't think that. History doesn't work that way. It will paint out the picture as you're painting. It's not going to be your vision, not going to be your just vision. And we're seeing similar things happening today, where so many atrocities are being carried out and so many people are justifying it horribly. So let me know what you guys think of this video. Did you know about all of this beforehand? I would love to know what you think, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.